Hello viewers and welcome to my new video. In today's video you're going to find out about the online feud between bands and about bands using samples on stage, my own opinion on this, how this relates to independent artists, and finally what I use to play samples. If this is of interest, stick to the end of the video, and also please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. Okay, let's go. I realized that I could be late to the table with this particular information, and recently there has been a feud online, particularly on Twitter, between a band called Falling in Reverse, who actually had to cancel, I believe, some of the shows because effectively someone stole their laptops and they kind of used samples through their laptops. A few other people, including some well-established artists, actually started commenting on Twitter and kind of having a go at Falling in Reverse for using sample on stage, sort of criticizing them, how is that you're not actually, playing live and the whole band is just playing everything they're supposed to be playing, as opposed to using samples, which is kind of, I don't know, maybe seen by some of these other artists as cheating. There have actually been quite a few videos already on YouTube made by quite big established YouTubers, including Rick Beato, Damian Keyes and also Bradley Hall on this particular subject. But I think that they all kind of took a slightly different approach and sort of talked about it from a slightly different perspective. But because my channel is more sort of for and about independent artists, I wanted to talk about this particular issue from through the independent artist's eyes. Okay, so what's my opinion on this? Well, I used to play in bands, for years, and I actually used to form bands, and I was a very old school person when it comes to these things. And I always believed that if you were going to play live, you had to put a band together firstly, then rehearse with those musicians. You have every single person who is playing every single instrument in the setup that you have as a band live on stage. So I actually never really, in the past at least, consider an idea of having some like backing tracks or samples being played simultaneously with the band on stage. There was actually a time when samples entered the world of the bands that I was in, when we actually started using an intro. So for example, we had an intro pre-recorded and we would play that intro at the beginning of the set, just before the first song from the set was about to start. This was actually my first introduction to using samples on stage, but of course those samples weren't being actually used during the music being played, and all that the band was kind of doing, including myself, we would play, real instruments on stage in real time, and there was nothing else being played, no backing tracks, no samples. However, my opinion has changed slightly on this when I started doing my solo stuff, and I also think that this translates into the world of independent musicians in general. For example, when you are a well-established and big artist, it actually becomes really easy, at least in my opinion, to find musicians, to play live with you. Because, for example, you could hire session musicians, and because there's a budget, there's effectively money there in the pot to pay these people. There's two advantages to doing that if you are a session musician. One is exposure. Obviously you get a lot of exposure with a big established band being on stage, and secondly, you're going to get paid. So people are attracted, there's an incentive for them to do so. Interestingly, Damian Keyes in his video on this subject was talking about actually cutting down on cost of hiring more musicians to play on stage by using samples. So actually that particular argument also comes into play here. The perspective I would like to present today is to look at these things from an independent artist's perspective, and I think that perspective is very different from a well-established big artist or big band. One reason for that is because you don't actually have the budget to be able to afford to pay these people. So you cannot attract people by saying, okay, well, if you join me on stage, I'm going to pay you this much. Unless you have a guarantee and you know exactly how much money you're getting from playing a gig, and it's not your own gig that you're putting on and sort of taking the risk around it, it's really tricky to predict. And it obviously, there's a possibility this might leave you out of pocket. If you overpromise to people, you say, okay, I'm gonna pay you this much, and then, you know, not enough people show up to the gig or whatever, and then you lose money, you might actually be out of pocket. So this presents a certain level of difficulty for an independent artist. If you are a smaller artist, not as well established, not as many people have heard of you, that's another hurdle that can become a blockage for you. Because, for example, if you are trying to find musicians to play with you, and for example you have a particular vision of what you actually want to play, what you want your music to sound like, and you try to explain this to other people, for example through an advert, because you've never met them before, they will read your description and they will think, oh, either I fancy playing this or I don't fancy playing this. So if you have a vision that doesn't quite sort of match with what they think that they want to play, it's going to make things extremely difficult for you, because you effectively might be looking for quite a long time and actually not be successful in finding those musicians that you need. I've noticed this many times actually, for example on the website called Join My Band, that when you go there, a lot of musicians, when they advertise themselves, they are very, very particular and detailed around what kind of music they would like to play, and that even includes sort of going down to the level of detail as to say, okay, I want to sound like this particular band or that particular band. And it can be very insular in a way, because some people just are not prepared to step outside of whatever that is that they might want to play. So if you have a particular vision, and if that vision actually steps outside of any conventions, norms like this, that, oh, I want to sound like The Police, or I want to sound like The Clash, or I want to sound like Terror, or I want to sound like this band or that band, I think it's going to make it very difficult for you to find musicians, especially when you do sort of like cross-genre stuff as well, because not everybody will be up for it. Some people are very kind of, I don't want to say close-minded, because, you know, in effect, you know, I used to be in bands that were very particular about what style we were playing. Now I've opened myself up to other types of things and other options, and actually, you know, crossing the genres and doing a bit of a crossover, a bit of fusion. But I didn't always used to be that way. But I can understand if there are more artists like me right now out there and they are trying to find musicians, this might present a certain level of difficulty for you. A lot of bands, especially younger bands, form when there's a group of mates basically, and each one of them learns to play a particular instrument, and they are very lucky, you know, being at the same time, at the same place, and they kind of decide, oh yeah, you know, our idols are this band or that band or this artist or that artist, and we just want to play like something similar, and they come together and they form a band, you know, and that doesn't really present any difficulties. But I think the older you get, sometimes also this works, because we will have mates on a particular scene that you've been a part of, and maybe you can ask certain people, you know, would you like to join my new project or my new band? And some people will want to do that, and that's fine. But I think that sometimes you may find it difficult. There are also specific types of musicians that you might find more difficult to find than others, and I'm gonna tell you, and probably you will know this anyway if you already are an artist or you are in a band, that for instance finding a drummer is always the hardest part, because there's probably less drummers than there are guitarists, you know, and then there's also probably less bassists than are guitarists and things like that. I was very lucky in the past actually, where I was able to find people pretty quick actually for my other projects. This time round though, I must admit that, you know, it wasn't as easy. I've had some people coming to the practice, to the rehearsal room, but they didn't kind of stick around. In that type of situation, you have two choices. choice number one is you're just gonna wait forever, you know, until you can find those people and actually have real musicians and they play with you on stage. And until such time, you're not gonna play any gigs. You're just gonna, you know, carry on writing music and just hope that one day that person will show up. Or you have another option of actually, would I use samples? I actually think that today's era of being able to produce your own records, just like I've done, actually opens up a lot of doors and opportunities when it comes to these things, because you basically have control. So if you've made your own record and you are basically in possession of all the tracks that you've recorded because you've got them in your DAW, then effectively you can just use them. You can just, you know, chop and use whatever you need in a particular moment in the song when you play on stage. I think this provides you with freedom to not have to wait for these people to kind of show up, and you can actually play gigs. You can actually go out there and play live. And this is exactly what I've done. So when I played my recent gig, and I played with the bass player Will, who's absolutely amazing, and I've been very fortunate to have him, you know, supporting me and playing alongside me on this project. But I didn't have a drummer, and I also recorded certain guitar tracks and parts that there were multiple guitars, and I wasn't able to play all those guitar parts when I was playing live on stage. So what I decided to do, for each song I prepared a different sort of composition, if you like a different sort of approach to the backing tracks, to the samples. Sometimes I would always use drums because I didn't have a drummer. Sometimes I would also introduce the second guitar. There was one part in one of the songs where there was a trumpet, and that trumpet was also there. So I've actually experimented with this, and after having played my first gig using samples, I must say that it was actually a very good experience, and it was actually a successful performance. The only thing what I would say is a negative about this, that when you want to do sort of more of an improvisation on stage, this doesn't allow you to do that, because you have to kind of stick to the track, you have to stick to the grid, because it's pre-recorded, and you have to kind of play along with it. You can't just kind of stop and, I don't know, introduce some crowd chanting in the middle of the song if that is not already a part of your song structure. In terms of what I use on stage to use samples, I'm just going to show you, and this is a very, very simple idea and a very simple approach. So in the case of the band Falling in Reverse, they obviously use laptops, and I believe that it's their drummer who actually operates the laptop, and actually on that laptop they have their DAW, digital audio workstation, where they can actually choose sort of in a live situation which tracks are going to be played and things like that. Well, I've taken a slightly different approach. One reason for that is probably because I do not have a drummer, so I don't have anybody from at the back of the stage to be able to operate this. But also for simplicity, if there's only two of us on stage, I'm going to tell you what I'm actually using. I've got this pedal by Boss called Loopstation RC3, alright? And effectively what this pedal allows you to do, it allows you to store WAV files on it, which is a fantastic functionality, I think, because not only you can record loops when playing live, so you can actually, so you know how it goes, you can kind of record some chords, loop it, then you can record maybe sort of like a bass line on it and loop it, and then you can start soloing over it. I'm sure you have seen some people actually do that. But what you can also do on this is upload and store WAV files on it. So what I've actually done is, my way of doing it is, I've gone into my DAW and I just muted the tracks that I didn't want. So the tracks that I decided that I would be playing live. So for example, the bass track, because I've got a bass player, so I've muted all the bass tracks, and I've also muted all the guitar parts that I felt I could actually play live, while singing, and I only left the drums, and I also left the guitar parts that I thought ordinarily, if I had a second guitarist, they would be playing those parts. And then there was that one track in which there's a trumpet, like I already said, so that trumpet is also there. And it's very simple, because effectively what you do, you have different channels here and you just switch the channels. So for example, say if I had 10 songs to play live, I would have them all sort of on each separate channel. So say channels 1 to 10, and all I would do is just to press between on the memory slots, basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, play them in succession, and all I do, once that channel is already set, then I can simply just kind of press it with my foot, and it works, and the sample starts playing. And also what is really helpful with that as well for both me and the bass player is that I also introduce a count in. So effectively there's like a 4 or 8 times, for example, count before the song starts, which means that we both start together and there's no problem whatsoever. So this is how I do it, and I hope that it has given you some inspiration today and some food for thought. So obviously if you have your own band or you're an independent artist building up to maybe performing live, don't get discouraged by the fact that you may not have all the musicians that you perhaps want to have. If you are struggling to find a drummer or another guitarist or whoever that might be, don't despair. You can overcome this actually, and you can still go out there and play live. You can actually design your samples around your needs so that you can have a full sound on stage and you can actually sound very good. Yes, if you can find all these people, fantastic. You can play in the old school kind of way. You can have a full band on stage, everybody performs, no samples whatsoever. But if that is not an option for you, using the samples, I don't think it's shameful, or honestly, if you want to perform, you want to perform. If you can't find people at this moment in time, I'm sure they will sort of appear in the future at some point because they will be attractive the bigger you grow or whatever. But right now you may not have them. Use samples. There's no shame in it. It works. It actually works really well. So thanks very much for watching. Please leave this video a thumbs up, and please give me a subscribe, because I'm still, on a way to kind of get into the YouTube partnership program, and I want to get there as soon as possible. I'm still building my channel, so every subscribe matters, and you are all very valuable to me. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video.